All right. Thank you, Ashley, so much for your service. Hey, everybody. David G., alcoholic, addict of many sorts. Really grateful to be here with you tonight. Really grateful to be studying and coming closer each week to winding down, finishing the book. We've been about 37 weeks now. We started in the preface of the book. We've really picked this book apart with a fine-tooth comb. We have looked at the real problem as we see it today. We know that it's not booze. We know that it's not alcohol. We know that it's not lust or drugs or any of that kind of stuff. We know today that we suffer from a hopeless condition of mind and body. And, the book describes that as self. We have looked all through these chapters, even in these back chapters, we've been able to pick out where self has been what's underlying the condition, the behaviors that we have taken, which has put us in a place that we've been hurt. And so the insanity of that is, I think it's your fault. I think it's their fault. I think it's my employer's fault. If everybody would just straighten up and do right, then things would be, we could go on with our life and all would be okay. But this keeps showing up. Resentment, fear, anger, lust, worry. The list goes on and on. We've talked about self all this time being a mental activity, not an entity, but a mental activity. Thoughts, emotions, attitudes, ideas, concepts, beliefs. These were the things that we started to recover from once I took a severe emotional beating after 25 years of sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous and come back in. And I was absolutely in a place to where I needed something. And I didn't know what that was because I'd been through the steps so many times. I didn't think there was anything that I could be taught. Of course, this wasn't me thinking all this. It was self. And so in coming back through this process of the book, I really began to understand how self is what had defeated us. The book had talked about it over and over and over. We have made decisions based on self. There's two words there. One is singular, the other is plural. We and self, they're not the same. Self manifested in various ways is what had defeated us. Self and us, they're not the same. And so my eyes, the veil really began to lift and I began to see what was really going on here. And as I went through the steps in the book and really began to recover from self this time, because I hadn't drank or drug in all those years, but lust was killing me and I just could not stop that behavior. And every time, fear would sober me for a bit like it does anything else. But after a time, the ego would rebuild itself and then here we would go again. And this went on and on and on. Well, this fell over into every area of my life, not just at home. This fell over to my job. This affected my work severely. I ended up losing my career of where I was at that time over this. And so when I came back through the process of the work this last time, and the man had taken me all the way through the process up to chapter 7, it had been my experience that's where it ends. We just stopped there. But he didn't do that. He continued on, and we read all the way to 164, really studying and picking apart the book the same way we had in the earlier chapters. Then he took me into the traditions, and he took me into the concepts, and I spent about 2 years with this man, and it was absolutely life-changing, the things that happened. So that's what we've been doing these 37 weeks. If you haven't listened to the tapes, I encourage you to, because they really break down. Not because I was the one leading them, but, it was definitely being directed by a power greater than self. And it has been an awesome study. And we're coming toward the end of it now. We'll finish up this chapter. We'll go into the last chapter, and that'll be the end of it. But, man, what a great experience it's been for me. Every time that I do one of these, whether I do it in person or I do it by Zoom, I always get so much out of this. People always message me all the time and say, hey, man, I just love that. I love all that you pointed out there. I get so much from this. But the same goes, to give it away is to keep it. And I don't think there's any other way. So with all that being said, tonight we're on page 141 of the book. Now, we talked about the man who wrote this chapter. This is one of the books other than the doctor's opinion in this book that was not written by Bill W. It was written by a man named Hank P., and I gave some history on him last week. His name was Hank Parkhurst. And Hank was a very successful businessman, but he was an alcoholic. In 1935, he ended up in Towns Hospital, and this is where Bill found him. Well, he would go on later to become a great asset to Bill and to Alcoholics Anonymous, because he is the one who created Works Publishing, published the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so this man has played a big part in all this. In fact, when Bill lost his home, he and Lois went to live with Hank and his wife, and they become very good friends. Toward the end of this chapter, you'll read, it says, today I have a little office that employs 2 or 3 guys. Well, Bill is one of those guys. And so there again, this man was very energetic. He had a lot of energy. He liked to make money. He wasn't crazy about the God idea at all. In fact, it was through he and another man named Frank M., where God as we understood him is what came up in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because they did not like the God idea. And as was mentioned last week, God, Spirit, Source, Thee, Thou, however you want to word it, is not found in chapter 10. Nothing connecting to a higher power. It comes more from a business standpoint. If you can find that in here, please tell me. I'll stop saying that. But I have studied this book up and down and back and forth, and that is not here. And so it's very strange that this would be the only chapter in the book that would not mention that. However, that's the way it is. So page 141 tonight, we're going to go second to the last paragraph. Actually, it'd probably be the third, where it says but. And that's really not a good place to start, but that's where we're going to start. So it says, but there are many men who want to stop, and with them you can go far. Now, if you take the employer out of this and you put a sponsee into this and you look at the same question, this is some things that not only, I need to focus on this because this is about the employer, but at the same time, I want to look at this with the people that I sponsor and the people that I try to help, because the ones who want to stop, with them you can go far. Your understanding treatment of their cases will pay dividends, not only for them, but for us as well, and we know that. Perhaps you have such a man in mind. He wants to quit drinking and you want to help him. For me, that becomes a question in this book. Is that the case? Do I know somebody who wants to quit? And am I willing to help them? I hear a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous talk about, call on me. If you ever need any help, call on me. When the day came when I called on those people, a lot of them wasn't there. And, I was very discouraged with that. But, it says you can easily see that he is mentally and physically sick. Over and over and over, this book does not talk about the spirit being sick. Now, I go to AA meetings and I hear that all the time. We are mentally, physically, and spiritually sick. I started, when I came back through this book the last time, and I took a close look at this with a different set of eyes and a new pair of glasses. I can tell you nowhere in this book does it say that our spirit is sick. Now, people's going to say, David, you're lying, because if you'll hold your place right there and go back with me to page 64 for just a second. And I do a lot of cross-reference, and for anybody that's new here, I reference the book back and forth, and so it's not going to be any different all the way to the end of the study. If you go to the bottom of page 64 in that last paragraph, it says, well, let's do the one up above it. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we sought out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. But here's what we want to pay attention to. Being convinced that self, not booze, not lust, not alcohol, not food, self, manifested in various ways is what had defeated us. I thought booze had defeated me. I thought lust had defeated me. I thought all these other things had defeated me, but the book's saying, no, it was self. It says we're going to consider its common manifestation, its meaning self. Resentment is the number one offender. It, talking about resentment, which is a common manifestation of self, destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it, resentment, which is a common manifestation of self, stem all forms of spiritual disease. See, not from the spirit, from resentment, which is a common manifestation of self. For not only have we been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick, not because of the spirit, but because of resentment, which is a common manifestation of self. I'm spiritually sick because of a human condition, and it's called self, and it's convinced me that my spirit is sick, and I keep chasing all these solutions to try to heal the spirit. Spirit's not sick. Spirit, source, whatever you choose to call that, it can't be sick. There's no way. And so nowhere in this book does it talk about that. Real quick to page 31. Middle of the page. And we went through this when we went through the study, but I'm going to bring it up again right here. Nowhere here doesn't mention spirit. Look at this. Middle of the page, here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, that's physical. Limiting the number of drinks, that's mental. Never drinking alone, that's mental. Never drinking in the morning, that's mental. Drinking only at home, that's physical. Never having in the house, that's mental. Never drinking during business hours, that's mental. Drinking only at parties, that's physical. Switching from scotch to brandy, that's physical. Drinking only natural wines, physical. Agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, mental. Taking a trip, not taking, mental. Swearing off forever, mental. With and without solemn oath. Taking more physical exercise, mental. Reading inspirational books, mental. You don't see anything about spirit there, nothing. All the way through this book, we could break the whole book down like we have. And if you haven't listened to the tapes, I encourage you to, because nowhere in this book does it talk about our spirit being sick. And it's no different back over here on 141. So it says you can easily see that he is mentally and physically sick. You are willing to overlook his past performances. That should be a question. Ask yourself that question, not only with your employer, your job. What about with your family? What about with the people you work with? What about your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be? Are you willing to overlook his past performances? In order to do that, there has to be forgiveness. And through this process, we should have achieved that by now. There was a series of work that we do at the top of page 67 as we're coming through the inventory process in this. And if we haven't done that prior to going into what we call the turnarounds, the fourth column, however you want to word it, doesn't matter. If you haven't done that, chances are a lot of this is still going to be hanging around. And there's an emotional butt kicking waiting on the other end of that. I promise you, at least there was for me. So am I willing to overlook their past performances? Suppose an approach is made something like this. State that you know about his drinking. That's pretty common knowledge. Somebody come to work drunk, I'm going to know it. If they've been drinking, I'm going to know it. I'm a drunk. I can spot that. And that it must stop. It must. Not maybe, or maybe it's a pretty good idea. No, it must. You might say you appreciate his abilities and would like to keep him, but you cannot if he continues to drink. In the oil field, we always say, that your chain is only as strong as the weakest link in it. And so, if you have one and they're not willing to stop, then like it says right here in this next sentence, a firm attitude at this point has helped many of us. Firm attitude being the key words. Next, can he be assured that you do not intend to lecture, moral, or condemn? That if this was done formally, it was because of a misunderstanding. See, I didn't understand. I made a lot of mistakes based on self. I lectured, I moralized, I condemned people for the very things that I was doing. But if you remember, this talks about this back on page 18 and 19 of this book. So if you will hold your place right there, let's take a run over there real quick. And we're going to take a look at that. At the bottom paragraph on page 18. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty. Now, they always told me, and I told people as well, that if you want to sponsor me, you're going to have to come to me and talk to me and show me that you have some kind of willingness. Well, my book right here says something completely different. I'm the man who's to be making the approach to them, not them to me. But it says he's had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he's talking about. You hear a lot of talk in the meetings, in the fellowship, a lot. And a lot of it sounds good and a lot of it sounds pretty. But after awakening from self, there's very little of it that I hear that I'm even interested in anymore. It says that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is the man with the real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except for sincere desire to be helpful. And here it is again, what we were reading on 141. There are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, and no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions that we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. So let's go back to 142. Next, he can be assured that you do not intend to lecture, moralize, or condemn. That's a statement. That's not just a pretty good idea. It says he can be assured, that he might be. No, he can be, because that's not what we're here to do. We're not. That if this was done formally, it was because of a misunderstanding, if possible, express a lack of hard feeling toward him. At this point, it might be well to explain alcoholism, the illness. There again, the book doesn't say anything about a disease, and I don't want to get into the terminology of that. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't. But the book doesn't talk about that. Over and over and over, it talks about an illness. Say that you believe he is gravely ill person with this qualification, being perhaps fatally ill. Key question right here for any man, whether he's an employer, an employee, a sponsee, does he want to get well? Period. That's the first thing I ask a man when I begin to work with him. Do you want to get well, and are you willing to go to any lengths to do it? Well, most everybody says, yes, of course I am. And as long as we read through the first 2 or 3 chapters of the book, they're all good with that. Soaking up the information, taking tons of notes, but you get over to step 2 in this book. You've got a series of exercises, about 3 to 4 of them there to do. That's when it starts getting it starts slowing down a little more and a little more. And then once that's over, you read on through, you really look at the self close. You make a decision based off of page 62. You back it up with a prayer off 63, and you get straight to inventory. And ask anybody on here that's been through this process with me. That's intense. That's not done in a few days or even a few weeks. That's pretty intense. So my question becomes, after I explain all of that to them, it's not because I'm trying to chase them off or run them off. Do you really want to get well? Because if you do, there's going to be some work, and we're going to dig down emotionally, and we're going to pull out some things that have been hiding in there for a long time, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, I promise. And so, does he want to get well? You ask because many alcoholics being warped and drugged do not want to quit. They don't. But the question becomes, does he? Do you? That's the question. Doesn't matter what they do. Are you wanting to? And here's the other part of that. Will you take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, to stop drinking forever? If you're in a bad relationship, are you willing to give it up? If you got a job that is causing you to drink and drug and lust and act out, whatever the case may be, but it pays real good money, are you willing to give that up? I know I wasn't for a long time. I made over 6 figures for many years. And I wasn't going to give that up. I mean, as bad as it was killing me, I wasn't going to give that up. But the question becomes, will you take every necessary step, submit to anything to get well, and to stop drinking, lust, and acting out, whatever it may be, forever? If he says yes, then there's another question behind that. Do you really mean it? Because we're going to find out. I'm going to put you in steps 10 and 11 from day one. Day one. I don't care if you've been here one day. I don't care if you've been here for 20 years. If you ask me to sponsor you, day one, you're going to step 10. And there's a 5-formula process on page 84 that breaks down how to keep an eye and a check on these emotions and thoughts all day long before they become actions. And so, do you really mean it? Because, I mean, we're going to work. That's for sure. I love it when I go to meetings and I hear people say, oh, God will take care of that. I don't need to worry about that. God will take care of that. And, you know, I read a lot of other books, and I do see where God did some work, but at some point he quit working. And after that, it's never recorded anywhere that he worked again. When we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, there's somebody going to work, trust me, but it's not God. It's us. And through this process, you definitely begin to see that. So if he says yes, does he really mean it? Or down inside, see, that's where it's all at. It's down inside, right? It's where self has us. Does he think he is fooling you? Key words. Does he think he is fooling you? Because chances are he might or he may not be. And that after rest and treatment, he'll be able to get away with a few drinks, or maybe click around on the internet just a little bit, or maybe visit some massage parlor, whatever the case may be, every now and then. See, that's what the mind tells us, every now and then. We're not going to do this all the time like we did before, just every now and then. It says, we believe a man should be thoroughly probed on this point. I believe that thoroughly. Be satisfied he's not deceiving himself or you. Now, whether you mention this book is a matter for your discretion. if he temporizes and still thinks, key word, we keep seeing self pop up here, still thinks that he can ever drink again, even beer, if he can ever act out again, even a little soft porn or whatever it may be, well, he might as well be discharged after the next bender, which if they're an alcoholic or a sex addict or whatever food addict it may be, that's almost certain to happen. It just is. Now look at that with sponsees. Are you willing to do that? I have people tell me all the time, David, I just can't do that. I can't do that. And I understand that. I do. That's not me. I've learned through the years that if that's continuing on and on and on, for me, it's just a waste of time. Not that they're a waste of time, because when they're ready, they can always come back. But until they are, I'm not going to keep chasing that dog with tail round and round and round. It's just, it makes no sense. So he should understand that emphatically, either you're dealing with a man who can and will get well, or you are not. Period. Sponsors on here. Look at that. Either you're dealing with somebody who wants to get well, if not, why waste the time with them? Same way with an employee, an employer, whatever it may be. But I definitely want to look at this whenever it comes to sponsees. Now, this may seem severe, and people on here would tell you that it is. People in meetings have told me that. My book tells me in this very next sentence, it's the best course for me to take, period. Now, after satisfying yourself, your man wants to recover and that he'll go to any extreme to do so, you may suggest a definite course of action. We're going to call that steps 4 through 12. That's where the definite course of action is. Now, I know that we need to look at 1, 2, 3 before that, but there's an interview process that most people don't even know that is in the book whenever it comes to sponsoring someone. And it's located over on page 90 of the book. Now, before this experience, somebody would say, hey, David, would you be my sponsor? Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go, and we just go do this and this. But when I come through this process, I learned back on page 90, and we've talked about this over and over, but let's jump over there for just a second on page 90 at the very top. This is what we should do with anybody prior to agreeing to sponsor them. There's a list of questions through there. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about it. Where do you live? How long have you been there? Are you married? You got any kids? How long have you been drinking? How long have you been a lust addict? When did that begin? How did that look? Where did that take you? What's that look like? What's your job? What's your hours? If I agreed to take you through this book, how many hours can you give me per week? I mean, all I can about him. If he does not want to stop, right there it is on page 90 again. Don't waste time trying to persuade him. You may kill a future opportunity. So I'm not going to read all that, but I'm just saying that it continues to bring us back to that over and over and over. So back to 142. For most alcoholics who are drinking or who are just getting over a spree, on top of 143, a certain amount of physical treatment is desirable, even imperative. The matter of physical treatment should, of course, be referred to your own doctor. That's not something that drunks just come up with. I hear people telling people that in meetings all the time. You need to go do this and this and this, and you need to get on this medication and that medication. And, I just finally got to the point where show me your damn degree. Show me where it's at. You tell me and show me that you've got the qualifications in order to order me to go do some of that stuff, and I'll do it. But until then, no, I don't think so. And so I think we become junior psychiatrists in here, and it kills a hell of a lot of people inside of the rooms if we're not careful. And so the matter of physical treatment should, of course, be referred by your own doctor. Whatever the method, its object is to thoroughly clear the mind and the body. Nothing about spirit here. Nothing. Of the effects of alcohol, lust, drugs, sex, food, whatever it may be. In competent hands, this seldom takes long, or it's pretty inexpensive. Your man will fare better if he's placed in such a physical condition that he can think straight and he no longer craves liquor. We know from the doctor's opinion in reading in this book that the craving for liquor does not start until we put it inside of our body. Now, if I'm 3 months sober and I think I'm craving a drink, and I've done this, I know. I'm not craving a drink, I'm obsessing on a drink, because after 72 hours, alcohol leaves the system, the body, and it doesn't return until it's put in again. So once we put it in, that sets up a phenomenon of craving, more of the same. Anything that produces a phenomenon of craving, whether you eat food and you want more and more and more and more and you can't stop, or if you get on the internet, you begin to lust, you begin to look at all this and you can't stop, you find yourself there all day long or 4 or 5 hours, well, that's a phenomenon of craving. So for the lust addict, any action taken outside of the thought, I click on that internet, I've taken action out of that thought. I drive to the massage parlor, I've taken action outside of that thought. I guarantee you that allergy is going to kick in. And I'm going to want more and more and more and more. And anybody on here can probably tell you that that has been their experience as well. So if you propose such a procedure to him, it may be necessary to advance the cost of treatment. That's only fair. If he's a good employee, that's somebody that I really want to keep, I would be willing to do that, provided I knew that he wanted to stop beyond a shadow of a doubt. But we believe, and I believe this too, it should be made plain that any expense will later be deducted from his own pay. This creates an atmosphere of responsibility. It is better for him to feel fully responsible. If your man accepts your offer, it should be pointed out that physical treatment, and this is important for us, definitely us. We're going to call this meetings. We're going to look at this in a different way, a little beyond what we're reading here. It should be pointed out that meetings is but a small part of the picture here, very small part. And for 25 years, that's all I heard. Go to meetings, go to meetings, go to meetings. Work steps, get a sponsor, go to meetings, go to meetings, go to meetings. But it's all about, and that's good. Get me wrong, I'm not down in the fellowship. I love it. God, I got to have you guys. I've got to have you. But I'm just saying that's a small part of the picture. It told us back on page 17 now. Let's take a look real quick. Let's go to page 17. There is a solution. Let's drop down just before the last paragraph begins. The feeling of having shared in a common peril. This is the fellowship. That's one element in the powerful cement. That's only one element. From what I've heard in meetings, that was the whole package. Go to meetings, go to meetings, go to meetings. But a common peril is what we have, and it's what we do when we come in here. We share a common peril. Notice the book says that's only one element. That's not all the elements. That's only one. He's going to give me a strong warning right here. And the powerful cement which minds, but that in itself, talking about the fellowship and the meetings, would have never held us as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out. What a promise. We got a way out. Wow. On which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. That's the great news, this book, not this fellowship. God love them and I got to have them. Trust me. But it's saying the book, this is the great news. The book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism, sexaholism, drug addiction, whatever it may be. We're talking about the program as outlined in the book. So, though you're providing him with the best possible medical attention, he should understand that he must undergo a change of heart. This is what we alcoholic addicts have to have. Just to put down the booze, just to put down the lust, the sex, the drugs, whatever it may be, the food, whatever, that's only a part of it. We must undergo a change of heart. And to get over drinking, this will require a transformation of thought, key word, because this is self. Remember, thought is made up of, it's a system of thought that's made up of concepts, ideas, beliefs, attitudes, actions. Remember, it's not an entity, it's an activity in the mind over and over and over and over. This will require a transformation of thought and attitude, both. That's how we recover from self. We had to place recovery above everything. There's a statement, above everything. For without recovery, we would have lost both home and business. Can you have every confidence in his ability to recover? While on the subject of confidence, can you adopt the attitude that so far as you are concerned, this will be a strictly personal matter, and that is alcoholic derelictions. The treatment about to be undertaken will never be discussed without his consent. I think anonymity is so important here in the workplace, in our meetings, in our fellowship. This is so important, man. I really hammer this home to the guys that I work with. It may be well to have a long chat with him on his return. But to return to the subject matter of the book, It contains, look at this promise, full suggestions by which the employee may solve his problem. Now, if your problem is alcohol, just put it down. You shouldn't have any more problems, right? If it's drugs, just quit using. Everything should be all right. If it's lust, just don't act out no more. Everything should be okay, right? If that's the problem. But every time I stop doing that, a different problem shows up. And it's angry, and it's pissed off, and it's hurt, and it's sad, and it wants to do something. See, that's the problem. I got to go back over here. I just got to. And Dennis T will love me for it. Let's go to page 45. First full paragraph. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. See, not lack of belief, not lack of trust, not lack of faith, not lack of drugs, alcohol, sex, booze, whatever it may be. Lack of power. That's our dilemma. We got to find a power by which we can live, and it has to be a power greater than self, obviously, but where and how are we to find this power? Yeah, no crap. I mean, that's what I want to know. Where are we going to find it? Well, that's exactly what the book is about. The main object is enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Not help you, not send you somewhere to do it. Connect back to this power. The power will solve the problem, because the problem is not drugs, alcohol, sex, lust, food, any of that. The problem is self. And so on page 144, bottom of 143, it said, the book contains full suggestions by which the employee may solve his problem. To you, some of the ideas, keyword, which are contained are novel. Perhaps you're not quite in sympathy with the approach we suggest. By no means do we offer it as the last word on this subject, but so far as we are concerned, it has worked with us. And I guarantee you, I've got 30 men and a few women here that will absolutely attest to this. In the last 3 to 4 years, this process does work for any addiction. It doesn't matter what it is. That's why this big book study versus all the ones that I've done other than just a couple is for all addictions, not just one. So by no means do we offer it as the last word, but so far as we're concerned, it's worked with us. After all, are you not looking for results rather than you are methods? If you want a method to go through the steps, I can give you some paperwork to fill out, and you went through the steps. But you come back in 6 months and let me know how your behavior is. Let me know how you're acting to the waitress down there, how you treating your wife at home. You know, yeah. Are we not looking? Are we not looking for results rather than methods? Whether the employee likes it or not, he'll learn the grim truth about alcoholism, and so will a sponsee. And I tell you, I had to. And I learned the grim truth about sexaholism too. And it's not pretty. It won't hurt him a bit, just his pride. And it'll hurt that a little bit. And maybe his feelings some. Even though he does not go for this remedy. So, you know, it's not a handout, it's a hand up. You know, we're not doing service. You know, if we give jobs, we do all this, that's good if we can do it. But we don't do all that just so that, hey, you're a good old boy, come on in here and let's do this. My main goal is, man, let's recover. Let's recover from this. So it says, we suggest you draw the book to the attention of the doctor is to attend the patient during treatment. If the book is read, it keeps coming back to the book over and over and over. The moment the patient is able, while acutely oppressed, now notice at this point, he's not chronic yet, he's just acute. Realization of his condition may come to him. And if that comes to him while he's sober, he's not going to lay there and think, hey, I'm just a sorry, bad drunk or a sex addict or whatever it is. It's going to come to him that, you know what, man, I've got resentments and fears that I can't overcome. I've got worry. I've got doubt. I've got anxiety. I've got all of this stuff going on, man, and nothing will stop that except for taking a drink, and then that's not even working anymore, or acting out. Realization of your condition is the first step. It just is. You know, it's not because I'm just so beaten to the ground. That's a big part of it, yes, but realization of my condition sets me up for a power greater than myself to be able to solve this problem for me. So I must have that realization. And notice how he says, if the book is read. The moment the patient is able, while acutely depressed, that realization may come to him. So we hope the doctor will tell the patient the truth. This won't be fun at first. We know that from being here for so long. It's not fun in the beginning. Whatever that happens to be, when the man is presented with this volume, keeps coming back to the book over and over and over, it is best that no one tell him that he must abide by his suggestions. The man must decide for himself. You're betting, of course, that your changed attitude, provided you got one, plus the contents of the book will turn the trick. 9 times out of 10, this will always work if you have had a transformation. You have had this awakening from self. In some cases it will, in other cases it may not. We don't get to choose on that. But we think that if you preserve the percentage of successes will gratify you. I look around this room right here on Zoom. I am completely gratified with the results I see here. I promise you. And beyond. This thing has went international now. There's all kinds of countries that are coming in saying, hey, man, that message of the book that you guys are talking about here, I want that. How do I recover from lust? How do I recover? How do I recover from alcoholism? We got people on every corner of the earth, not just the U.S. Well, we've got people everywhere now standing ready to help others. Man, what a blessing God has done, and what a miracle he has done in these last 3 to 4, well, forever. But, for me, these last 3 to 4 years. So as our work spreads, our numbers increase. That's what's happened here. We hope your employees will be put into personal contact with some of us. Meanwhile, we are sure a great deal can be accomplished. Look at this promise by the book alone. On your employee's return, talk with him. Ask him if he thinks he has the answer. If he feels free to discuss his problems with you, if he knows you understand, then he'll probably not be upset by anything he wishes to say. He'll probably be off to a fast start. In this connection, you can remain undisturbed if the man proceeds to tell you shocking things. A man comes to me and tells me he stole a ton of money from me in my business. That used to would have shocked me. Anymore, it really doesn't. If I knew that man was an alcoholic and I kept him on anyway, I should have been looking for that to happen to me, for sure. So he may, for example, reveal he's padded the expense account, or that he's planning to take your best customers away. In fact, he may say almost anything. If he has accepted our solution, which, as you know, demands rigorous honesty, can you charge this off as you would a bad account? Start fresh with him. I promise you, if you do, he'll make it right. He will make it right through this process. He's got no choice but to do it, or he'll go back. If he owes you money, you may wish to make terms. Well, we're running pretty close to the end of time now, and we're going to finish off this chapter next week, but I think that'd probably be a good place for us to stop. And I want to thank you guys for coming out and definitely listen to me for 45 minutes straight. That's a huge blessing. Nobody ever wanted to listen to me ever. They wanted me to hurry up and get the hell out of there as quick as possible. So for you guys to do that, you've really blessed me tonight. So thank you. Thank you very much.
This concludes David's share on tonight's chapter, but we encourage you to keep listening as he answers questions from the audience and shares additional experience, strength, and hope.
David, a question. Obviously, I got a big book step study. I come to High Road to New Freedom, really have sort of changing my attention from open AA meetings to this form of meeting nowadays. And the question is, in the early days of AA, were the teachings from the sponsors to the sponsees exactly the way that you are teaching us here so admirably every Tuesday night? Where did this become so diluted that in open AA meetings in England, for example, I never ever heard anybody talk in depth about Step 4, Part 3. It seems that so much of this book has been overlooked by people, and I'm just wondering, because of your knowledge and experience with Joe and Charlie, who clearly have been around for so many decades, when was the dilution starting to take place from what really is a very pale reflection on what we're picking out from the book nowadays? That's my question. I'm just inquisitive to know that.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you, Michael. Man, it's always good to see you, brother.
And you, man. Thank you.
The first question you asked, that did in the early days that they go through it the way that we have here for 37 weeks on Tuesday nights, my answer would be no to that, because they were working with a lot of brand new people. Basically, the message that I carry today is not only for the new person, but it's more for the person that has been here for a long time and has really struggled emotionally in his recovery and his sobriety. He's sober, but man, he is really depressed and all of these things and can't really quite understand what's going on. But as far as where it had gotten diluted, and this was coming from Charlie, who was not my first sponsor, but he was my second one for sure. And he always talked about in the 1980s that, treatment centers were popping up on every corner. It's almost as if the insurance companies were making a killing off of the treatment centers it was just everywhere. They were going in the bar saying, hey, you want to get sober? Let's go, and they'd take them right on to treatment.
Wow.
What happened is, up to that time, the fellowship and the program as outlined in the big book were the same. There was no difference whatsoever. So in the early part of this, way back over, let's see, where would that be? That would be, I'm going to say Roman numeral 19. I'm not real good with Roman numerals, but I'm pretty sure it's XIX. It starts talking about schisms that would split AA apart. And soon AA was beset by these problems on every side and in every group. But if we look at that, let's see, prior to that, it talks about how it was like 50% of that. What is that? Roman numeral 20, XX. It'll take just a second to flip to that and forward to the second edition. And it says, that this period was being ironed out. Public acceptance grew by leaps and bounds. For this reason, there was two principal reasons. The first one, large number of recovery in united homes. That's a pretty good reason. These made their impression. But look at this. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained at 50%. That's unheard of. 25 after some relapses, and of the remainder that stayed on, showed improvement. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but that's about 75% of the people, because in those days, the program and the book and the fellowship was absolutely the same. There was no difference. But after these treatment centers in the 80s, all these people started coming in and they began to talk in our meetings about things that they had learned in treatment. Now, Charlie said it was through no fault of theirs. It was through the fault of ours. As old timers, we didn't stand up and say, no, that don't belong here. We've got a program that works for us here, and this is what it is. Take it or leave it and move on. We didn't do that. In fact, we stepped back and we let that come in and come in and come in. And as a result of that, one day we look up and say, look what the hell they've done to our AA. Well, it wasn't them. It was us. We allowed it. And that's where it really began to get diluted and watered down. And that's what he always explained to me.
So, David, I'm on page 142, and I have a question for you. I'm listening to you go through this chapter as a sponsor working with sponsees. And in the paragraph that begins, if he says yes, there's down at the bottom, it says, be satisfied. He is not deceiving himself or you. And beside it, I wrote, maybe I'm too gullible. How do I tell if my sponsee is deceiving me or deceiving themselves? I don't chase my sponsees. I don't race after them and try to cure them. But how do I know if they're lying to me?
Well, his lips are probably moving. You know what I mean? But no, my experience with that is, I put them in steps 10 and 11 from day one. And a lot of people say that, no, you're not supposed to do this. But according to AA history, that's exactly what they done. Examination, prayer, and meditation from the beginning. If he's deceiving himself or you, he's not going to be able to do that for very long. For one thing, he's not going to do that anyway. He's going to quit doing that. And when he stops doing that, then that gives me a pretty good idea of where he's going to be in the rest of the work coming through. So it's been my experience that and I've heard so many through the years that I can begin to pick it out. If he tells himself, well, I don't need to go to as many meetings now. I need to be with the family more often. I need to, I need to focus more on my job. Well, that's all well and good. But this book tells me that, there will be no job. There will be no home. There will be none of this if we don't do this first. So those are the things I start looking for in his vocabulary. The family didn't matter at all a month ago when you were out doing whatever it is you do. And now I think it's good that you want to spend time with them, but trust me, they're not going to mind you spending 1 hour with me or 1 hour in a meeting. I promise you they're not. So I start listening for stuff like that. And then, it becomes pretty clear whether he's trying to deceive me or you. And, and I'll have a talk with him, the first time or so about it. But pretty much after that, we're looking to make other arrangements. And that's just my experience, but that's how I know. Thank you.
Actually, I'd like to ask a question because my question was right in that paragraph where it says he will be able to get away with a few drinks now and then. What's been your experience, David? Somebody comes to you and they're saying, I'm ready to put down the porn, but not put down the weed or whatever it is. That's not their primary addiction. Do you still work with them or try and focus on all the addictions or just one at a time?
Yeah, I believe for myself, the book in the very beginning tells us, that, entire abstinence is what we're looking to acquire here. And, I think we deceive ourselves if we think that we can do anything mind altering and stay away from porn. I don't know about anybody else, but in my case, that was definitely not. Now, some people may not have a whole lot of trouble with one or the other, but I do know that we work at that. And here's what I told a guy just not too long ago, actually, and it didn't work out with us because, I had to let him go. But I told him, I don't really care what day you call yourself sober. I know that one of the fellowships that I attend are very heavily on a certain way of a sobriety definition. I understand that, and I respect it. I do. But if that man is so focused on that he can't focus on the work, then his focus is off the work and it's on trying to live up to that, and he's probably going to fail. Most likely. So for me, it doesn't really matter what day he calls himself sober there. But if he's doing things that get in the way of this work as we're going through it, then those things are going to have to be addressed. And if it's not, then we're going to have to move on and do something different. And so for me, what you read there, it says, does he think he is fooling you? And then after some rest, he can get away with a few drinks now and then. He might fool me or deceive me just a little bit, but it's going to manifest itself. It's going to show up. So it doesn't really matter so much what I believe. It's what I'm going to watch as we go through this process together. And it'll appear pretty quick, you know that as a sponsor. You've seen it quite a bit. So that's my experience with that. For me, there again, I would rather him not be as focused on that definition as I would him be focused on recovering from self. So that's just me, though. A lot of sponsors don't feel that way, and that's okay. Anything I've read here tonight, if your sponsor tells you something different, your sponsor is right. Listen to them. This is my experience.
It just seems like this book, and once we go through and we read these principles, most times are exactly opposite of my default. And it's just over and over, I see that I have to learn to live a different way. And part of that is on 144 when it says, when the man is presented with this volume, it is best that no one else tell him he must abide by its suggestions. The man must decide for himself. And over, it's talking about tradition 11 here, that the principles in this program is not about chasing. It's not about a crusade. It's not about reform. Any part of that that's coming out of me will not only chase them away, but it doesn't work. I have to allow them to have the willingness to come and get more. And with that, it doesn't work any other way. And those that aren't hungry for it, I really have to just let them drift off into where the disease will take care of that and cause more pain to where they're ready again. Doesn't mean I'm going to get rid of them. But in some cases, I've worked with enough sponsees to know when they're, when they're just playing games. And I put an end to it pretty darn quick. I just had one recently where we set a time up. I was ready to go and I didn't come. And normally I won't. I'll just let it go. But I thought, oh, he's brand new. So I try and reach out to him. And 3 hours later, he finally has some. Now, I would have accepted any excuse. Hey, dude, I was out drinking. I was out, back in my disease and I was totally away. Anything like that, I would have said, hey, no problem, man. Let's make our date. Let's do it for tomorrow then. So we set another date the next day. And his excuses were horrible. So finally I wrote him back because I was done on the second time and he wouldn't answer me back. So I finally the next text, like an hour, said, hey, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm done. Boom, he answers right back. Oh, wait, there's a big misunderstanding. I said, man, I'm sorry. I can't help you, brother. And I let him go. There's so many people out there that need sponsorship that if somebody's really not ready, I have to, because I need to work with somebody. And that was 2 days that I was expecting and looking forward to working with somebody that didn't happen. I need somebody that's already calling me. Hey, can we get another time in? Can we do this? Because that's what I need to keep that reservoir open and allow God to use me, because I have to be a service and I enjoy it. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know me. I'm right the opposite of that. I mean, one day would be way too many. So, I love the way that Dennis does. I mean, he's taught me a lot about being a little more gentle as we went through this journey, but not a whole lot. So, I mean, either we're going to come in and do this deal or we're not. And it's better to find out sooner than later. And that's just me. I don't have a lot of time for horseplay at all. I about died from this deal. I about died. And I don't have time for bullshit, not for a minute. So that's just me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, David. You've taught me well on that too, as far as learning to be more like that. That's what I needed. Thanks.